Well, they got the bastards. Great, good, about time. Took them long enough. Good morning. It's good to be here on a Thursday on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. That's right. They've got a couple of guys in custody, and they're members, by the way, of a group. Can we use the word gang around here, or is that also forbidden? They're a member of a gang called the 9th Street Mob. They operate in an east side neighborhood of Kansas City, writes Channel 41. I can't call them Woke 41 anymore. They've done a very good job reporting the last couple of weeks on violent crime in this town. And these two guys, Jose Olivas and Brian Favela, 24 and 22 years old respectively, have been charged with 26 felony counts in connection with the Crown Center shooting from mid-January. Now, you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, this was one of those stories that for weeks, in the wake of the Super Bowl parade shooting, many of us, including Brad Lemon, who's the Fraternal Order of Police, was saying, hey, you still don't have any arrests from Crown Center. Well, you had them, but then you let them go because you had to do more investigating, and then you had to go out and rearrest them again. I've been told that by law enforcement and folks in and around the situation. So finally, as we approach March, I mean, it should be March 1st. These leap years are just nonsense. We're sitting here basically in March, and finally, you have a couple of guys who are, yes, thugs. Can I use that word, by the way, or is that going to offend some of you? Okay, we're on the same page. We can call them thugs. No one's going to be upset by that. You've got a couple of thugs who have now been charged, 26 felony counts. These guys face 3 counts of unlawful use of a weapon, 6 counts of armed criminal action, 1 count of first-degree terroristic threat, and 3 counts of first-degree harassment. Favela and Olivas are being held at the Jackson County Adult Detention Center on a cash-only $500,000 bond. Well, it's funny how we also magically find jail space for these alleged criminals when we need to, isn't it? I mean, we always hear, oh, we don't have enough jail space for the bad guys. Where are we going to put the bad guys? There's nowhere to put them. You'll find a place when you arrest bad guys and when you charge bad guys and when you basically make them wait in these jails for their court dates. They just seem to find space, don't they, when they pull bad guys into custody? Now, I'm not convinced we ever would have gotten here had the pressure not been ramped up on the prosecutor's office in the wake of the tragedy at the Super Bowl parade, because nobody was killed in that situation down at Crown Center. Now, you did have innocent people caught in the crossfire of that whole thing because it was, I want to say it was like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock at night when the shootout happened at Crown Center. But this is long overdue. This is the kind of stuff that this prosecutor's office should be doing on a daily basis, arresting the worst criminals, committing heinous acts, talking about the crimes they commit, the gangs that they're a part of, and really sharing with the public and truly being transparent. Not the transparency that Gene likes to talk about, but truly being transparent about who these people are that are terrorizing neighborhoods, and not just, east or west side neighborhoods, but now very public and commercial areas like Crown Center.
Well, the wheels of justice turn slowly, but apparently we're driving a manual and have hit second or third gear at this point because the outbox there on her desk is suddenly getting empty. Like I pointed out, the Independence shooter thing from November came up last week, and now this.
Mm-hmm. It's funny how suddenly there's a little fire.
Found another gear.
There's a little fire under the butt of the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office. And it's terrible to think that it took a tragedy that got worldwide attention to finally do it. But at this point, you would have to be somebody who literally is not paying an ounce of attention to not come to a very obvious conclusion that all the crime that this town has suffered through, in Jackson County in particular, over the last several years, does not have some tie and some connection to the awfulness of this prosecutor's office. But as John noted, now suddenly things are starting to move a little bit. There's some action happening here. So to take you behind the scenes, too, on this Crown Center deal from a few weeks ago, and it's amazing. I was talking to Nick Haynes about this from Kansas City PBS last time I was up there doing his Week in Review show. And he was telling me how he was out somewhere in town and talking about the shooting at Crown Center from mid-January where these, gangs apparently just opened up fire on each other. Thankfully, nobody was killed, but there were innocent people just kind of roaming Crown Center when it took place. He said he was shocked how many people didn't even know about this. Didn't even know that this happened. I mean, the news will cover it for 12 hours, but then they'll move on to something else. And, the Star will make excuses. They won't really hammer Gene over any of this. So on and on we go. But he was just stunned at how few people knew this even happened. And I'm like, well, our listeners know, damn it. You guys know. We're on top of these stories. But I understand the average person that's, tuned into Led Zeppelin this morning may not know what's going on with this stuff. So anyway, one of these guys, Olivas, recorded himself following the other groups yelling obscenities, using gang language, and saying that he was ready because he had a switch, a reference to the weapon that he was using. He later sent a text indicating that he was smacking it out with suckers in Crown Center. Mark sent me that same text the other day. He was smacking it out with suckers in Crown Center. Geez, I guess you're not the only one there, Mark. You proud of that? Newborn, smacking it out with suckers?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, by the way, he spelled suckers on his text, Succas. I mean, these are real cream of the crop here in Kansas City. But don't call them thugs. That would offend them. Don't use that language.
One of the commentators I watch on YouTube, I can't remember his name, but he always refers to them as young scholars. So we have two young scholars, he'll say. Well, there you go.
That's fine. How about two young suckers, to use their own language? I like that. Which authorities believe is an admission of his involvement in the Crown Center shooting. Olivas was arrested the next day at the airport, attempting to board a flight to Seattle, while Favela was taken into custody later that day after officers followed a vehicle from the airport to a KCMO residence. Both were then released after the investigative hold ended and subsequently charged. But the case was sealed until these two men, Olivas and Favela, were arrested. So these guys, one of these guys was caught trying to get on a plane to Seattle. They arrest him, and then they release him. I mean, I know you got to feel good about your charges, but you're telling me that right there is not admission of a soft-on-crime prosecutor's office. I know someone's going to call, you're not an attorney. I don't care. I have an ounce of common sense. I'm not an idiot. And I know this much. You do not let somebody who is shooting up very public places, highly foot-trafficked areas with innocent bystanders, who then try to get on a flight to Seattle the next day, you don't let that person walk. Now, thankfully, they've got him back in custody. He's been charged with multiple felonies, and he's not, God willing, ever going to he won't see the streets again for a very long time. Put it that way. But wow, this story, in many ways, is Kansas City crime in a nutshell. But hopefully now with the pressure that's been ramped up in the office, things will start to change, and they'll start to change sooner rather than later. We've got a busy Thursday. Mayor Quinton Lucas is going to join me at 7:30. I will talk to him about this story. We'll tie it into still what we know and what we don't know about the Super Bowl parade rally. So all that coming up with what is always going to be a news-making conversation with Quinton Lucas at 7:30. If you're not listening, if you can't listen on the radio, 95.7 FM at that time, make sure you are streaming us on our KCMO Talk Radio app. 913-408-7957 as we get it rolling on a busy Thursday morning right here on KCMO Talk Radio. Oh, and by the way, was there a little stadium deal announcement yesterday? Chiefs roll out their renderings. What'd you think? We'll get to it coming up on KCMO.
Arrowhead is a special place. It is among the most iconic stadiums in professional sports, and it has become a bucket list destination for NFL fans around the country, and it has grown to be recognized around the world. For so many of our fans, this place reminds them of family, and that is certainly the case for me. As you know, my father once called Arrowhead his favorite place on earth. I grew up coming here, cheering on the Chiefs with my parents and siblings, and cultivating memories within these walls. This place means a lot to our family, just as it means a lot to our fans.
That's Clark Hunt yesterday, the big announcement we were waiting for at Arrowhead Stadium. What were their plans going to consist of if you, the Jackson County taxpayer, vote yes on April 2nd? Well, we saw the renderings, and it's basically what I expected. I never thought there was going to be a roof. The money was not going to be there for a roof. It is going to be largely cosmetic upgrades. You will have more suites. You will have the suites in the end zone. That's something I heard Mark Donovan talk about yesterday. You will have easier access from corner parking lots. There will be a fan activation zone where the old Kauffman Stadium was, if this all does go through and the Royals end up moving downtown. And there will be more points of sale, as they said yesterday, easier abilities for you to buy $20 beers. All of those things. And yes, there'll be some improvements like on the upper deck. Which,
card only, please.
No cash. Yeah, no cash. Upper deck, by the way, this was noted yesterday by Mark Donovan. Some improvements to the upper deck. You know, for those of us who are regular fans going to games, this will matter more than adding suites. Here was Mark Donovan yesterday.
Let's go to the upper deck. We talked a lot about having an impact on every single fan and every single level of our stadium. What we're going to do is we're actually going to add upper concourse canopies on the two sidelines. So that'll provide cover for our upper deck fans. These are the areas that are gathering areas today, and now we're adding cover that will have not only infrared heat, but also those enormous fans that will create some airflow in the summer months. So it's just a better experience for everybody on that level, and it gives the opportunity to be able to spend more time in those areas.
That was President Mark Donovan. And I can appreciate that because it can get hot as hell or pretty damn cold up there.
Yeah, when the stadium opened, we were making sure we were covered by NORAD because those corner seats were invading Soviet airspace up there. You're way up there. So. And in the elements, too, man. You're not hiding from anything up there.
There is nowhere to hide. So that'll be a nice little addition for fans in the upper deck. Also, something he noted when I was watching the press conference yesterday is that if you are in the upper deck, you can now do a full 360 around the upper deck.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Instead of going down and up and back and forth. So it'll be a much better experience for the average fan in the upper deck concourse, which is great. This is all basically what I thought it was going to be. The only thing I wondered, and I think many of us wondered yesterday, was whether or not the old Kauffman Stadium was going to be hotel space, was going to be, sports betting venue. Not that Missouri has that yet, but you get the point. Some type of entertainment complex. And basically, if you haven't seen the pictures, it's but it's going to be an outdoor activation center, as they're calling it. They could have some, live music out there, some concessions, basically a space for them to make more money, which is fine. I mean, I'm sure they'll charge a pretty penny to get into this thing potentially, but whatever, that's cool. It's what I expected. It's not a brand new ballpark downtown, but it's what they need. And Clark Hunt, good for him in saying, listen, this is a venue that Kansas Cityans love, that the world recognizes, and that his family loves. So, even if he could go build something new, why do that? And in an era when every owner simply wants to just get up there and say, we need a new stadium, damn it, because Clark Hunt's not doing that. And I respect his approach on that front.
Yeah, I was trying to conceive and think, if sports betting were already legal in Missouri, would that have made it more likely some kind of a hotel or something was there? But I thought the access to the place, that's not public thoroughfare through there. So that may have contributed to the decisions made.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I'm sure they could make it happen, but it might be not worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean, if you're only going to have it in use 8, 9, 10, 11 Sundays a year for sports, I mean, even if you're thinking about concerts, right? Are you going to go to a concert and then say, I'm going to stop by the sports book and bet on the Angels-Mariners game afterwards? Like, probably not. Mark will, because he's a degenerate.
I'll do it, yeah.
Mark's in there giving me a thumbs up.
Give me a Julio Rodriguez double for his first at bat, yeah.
You are such a degenerate. Unbelievable. But most people not named Mark aren't going to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking the complex grounds are basically secure, if you will. So somebody would have to open that up to allow, access to it.
And who's going to really do that? Who wants to do that? Who wants to deal with that?
I'll go to the airport to go eat. I'll go to the hotel.
True.
I'll be there with Mark.
Oh, yeah. You guys will get fleeced, for $25 hamburgers to go hang out at the...
keep the cup.
Yeah. one of those places. No, thanks. I'm a pass. So the Chiefs need to carry this. Here's what this comes back to. The Chiefs are going to have to carry the day. Yesterday, I got lunch with a couple of buddies. Well, one buddy and one guy I just met for the first time. And he's pretty involved in the Crossroads District. And, he's got multiple businesses in town that many of you would know. And he is an advocate. They both were advocates for the ballpark. But they both admitted that this thing has a tougher uphill climb than even they realized a few weeks ago. Because the groundswell movement, the grassroots movement against it is more than they considered. And I told them, I said, if you guys have been listening to my show more frequently, I mean, they listen, but they got to listen more frequently. If they had listened more frequently, they would realize that what I've been saying now for the last couple of weeks is that you are going to have progressives like KC tenants potentially come together with conservatives in eastern Jackson County to push against this and to make a move against this for very different reasons. But it's happening. And the narrative of these groups are, I don't want to say they're winning out, but they're making more noise than I think either team considered. And the teams, mostly the Royals, who have the harder sales pitch here, are still being very quiet. They apparently believe their internal polling is so strong on this that they will be able to get this thing passed with a couple of pretty commercials. And I told them yesterday, I said, yesterday, meaning Wednesday, we probably took a couple of dozen calls on this, and most people were very skeptical. Most people were not in favor of whether you want to call it a new 3/8 cent sales tax or extending the old tax, whatever it is. The vast majority were not for it. Now, I understand that people that are going to call are more likely those who are going to be against something. That's typically how it works, right? The people who show up to city council meetings are usually pissed. They're not there to tell a city council what a great job they're doing. Hey, great week you guys had. Just wanted to show up and tell you things were going well in town. Like, no one does that. So it's the same thing in what we do in our format. But still, don't discount it. And I think if either team discounts the groundswell, which is across the political aisle, they're making a calculated mistake and an error. And I don't think team ownership of the Royals or the Chiefs are doing that on purpose. I think they're being led in the wrong direction by their political consultants potentially. But getting out there, being the face of this, going rah-rah Kansas City, rah-rah Chiefs, rah-rah Royals is going to go a long way for them if they want to get this tax passed coming up on April 2nd. 913-408-7957. It matters. It matters who is running your county's prosecutor's office. Do you know the answer to that? If you're in Jackson County and it's Gene Peters Baker. Do you know the answer to that if you're in Platte County and it's Eric Zond? Do you know these answers to those questions? I hope you do. I want you to. Do you know Steve Howe in Johnson County? These are the people that ultimately will keep the worst characters off the streets. Zachary Thompson in Clay County, all these folks that are those guys that we hope will keep the worst actors in our communities at bay, behind bars, and in prison. They matter. Good morning. It's great to be here, 7:06 on a Thursday on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and stream us on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Mayor Quinton Lucas is coming up at 7:30, and 1 hour from now, the Attorney General for Missouri, Andrew Bailey, is going to make an announcement right here on this show. Don't miss that 1 hour from now. I bring this up in the wake of the tragedy down in Georgia last week, where this young girl, Laken Riley, was visiting her friends at the University of Georgia, and she went out for a run, and she never came back because allegedly an illegal immigrant killed her on the running trail. Well, we now know that one of the major problems down there in Athens, Georgia, home of the University of Georgia, is that the mayor and the prosecutor's office are as woke as they come. Let's go back 5 years ago when the mayor of Athens, Kelly Girtz, declared Athens a sanctuary city. Take a listen.
The Athens-Clarke County Unified Government is welcoming to people from all lands and backgrounds and strives to foster a community where individuals and families of all statuses feel safe, are able to prosper, and can breathe free.
That was 5 years ago. Now, yesterday, the mayor of Athens, Kelly Girtz, held a press conference, and he wanted to make it very clear that what happened to Laken Riley, young girl visiting the University of Georgia, had nothing to do with the illegal immigration problem that this country has suffered through under Joe Biden. No, nothing to do with that whatsoever.
While 2019 was not that long ago, you might remember the dynamic we were living in the late teens in this country, where you had
the dynamic we were living in the late teens in this country. What is he talking about? What is this absolutely ignoramus mayor talking about?
Mm-hmm.
You remember the times in the late... He's justifying why he made Athens a sanctuary city at the time. Oh, the climate in America in the late teens. Yeah, I remember everyone was prospering pretty well, more so than right now. Prices were significantly lower. The economy overall was healthier. Don't tell me about your 401k. I mean, the real economy was significantly healthier. The world had much more peace and prosperity, and the border was far more secure despite having some issues. That's what I remember from the late teens in this country, John.
I guess he thought that was an original statement to say that Athens welcome all people.
Yes.
That kind of thing. See, that's America. That's what the Statue of Liberty is for.
Mm-hmm.
That's the history of Ellis Island.
Yes.
Et cetera, et cetera. No need to make a special statement for your little city because all you really mean is you won't enforce federal laws.
Bingo.
the President of the United States speaking in the most vile terms about people who were foreign born. And you had that notion metastasizing in places like Charlottesville.
Those are his own people yelling at him, by the way, at the mayor of Athens, Georgia. They're yelling at him, claiming that, 5 years ago, Trump was berating people who were foreign born in this country. No, it was about people who were trying to come here and break the law to get here. I don't remember Trump going around just talking about, Russians and Asians and Africans who were here in America legally and being contributing citizens to the country. I don't remember anything like that. Boy, talk about leaving out the nuanced part of the conversation, John.
The Muslim ban was a concoction of the media.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Mm. Remember that?
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
No such thing.
There's no Muslim ban in this country. It was looking at targeted countries who have large numbers of individuals who want to kill Americans and saying if we can't figure out a way to process these people properly, then we have to put a pause on immigration from the country until we get a handle on who's who. But no, that was a Muslim ban, deemed the media. Anyway, let's continue with this goober. Mayor of Athens, Kelly Gertz.
Maine, I caution against conflating immigration and crime. The data demonstrates that the two are not connected. Because the impact of federal immigration policy on localities has been under such consistent discussion in recent months, I do want to say a few words about this. It's my 18th year as a local government policymaker, and my work has overlapped with 4 U.S. presidencies and numerous iterations of Congress. All of them have failed to reach agreement on how to handle immigration.
What a gaslighting punk this guy is. Mayor of Athens, Georgia, Kelly Gertz. Days after his community is at the epicenter of a violent criminal attack, a murder by an illegal immigrant of a young college girl who was out for a run. He gets up there and gaslights his own people, gaslights the entire country, claiming that, we should caution between immigration and crime. This is not immigration and crime. No one is saying that legal immigrants who are here, who have gone through the process, which make America great, they do, are the problem. It's why you can't allow 8.5 million people into the country that you don't know through an illegal process, ship them all over the country to wherever they want to go, and then hope that it works out without knowing anything about their backgrounds. It's a disservice to the American citizen. Rich, white, skin color doesn't matter. It's a disservice to everyone of any background, of every socioeconomic level. That's what it is. And for this mayor to get up there and make the claims that he's making this week and then say, well, Congress hasn't done its job. I've been doing this, 4 presidencies. No one's done its job. As if Joe Biden wasn't bragging about stripping down executive orders from the prior guy that at least kept the border in relative check. The gaslighting here is unbelievable from this guy. And that's why I get it. It's an election year. Everyone's all freaking out, and understandably so, about, who's going to control Congress, who's going to control the Senate, the White House, everything else. If you have local politicians, from your mayors to your prosecutors to your city councils, who are as feckless as guys like Kelly Gertz, they will do a lot of damage to our communities, no matter what part of the country you're in. Mayor Quinton Lucas, speaking of mayors, he's going to be here at 7:35 on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We'll be having the conversation with him in 20 minutes. In the meantime, an awesome story I've got to share with you from one of our area hospitals. This is the kind of stuff we should be celebrating. And if you like babies and you like love stories, this is what it's all about. And you like families, you're going to love this story. We'll get to it next on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. With all the bad news that's out there, we just need some good news once in a while. And we try to bring it to you as best we can and have some fun with the news here on KCMO every single day. But I admit, sometimes it's tough. Some days are more difficult than others. But this story right here in Lee's Summit is the kind of stuff that we should be celebrating and should be going viral. Take a listen to this.
A Lee's Summit couple refused to let a snag in their wedding plans upend their vows. That snag, the bride went into early labor 3 days before their wedding. The nurses asked Sarah and Brandon if they still wanted to get married before the baby came, and they said yes. So their hospital staff decorated their hospital room. They turned a bedsheet into a wedding dress for her. They made her a veil out of gauze. Another soon-to-be dad stepped in as an ordained minister.
By the power invested in me by the state of Missouri, I'm pleased to officially announce you Mr. and Mrs. Perry, and you may kiss the bride.
Yay! Congratulations. And their baby was born early the next morning on Valentine's Day. Aww. Congratulations all around.
That's what I'm talking about. Let's go, Brandon. Way to go, buddy. I love that. Let's go, Brandon. Brandon Perry asking his fiancée, Sarah, just getting it done. They were set to get married. The baby decided to come at 35 weeks. So they got married in the hospital the day before the baby was born. February 13th, Sarah Perry's water breaks at 35 weeks. They were going to get married on February 16th. And then the nurses at St. Luke's East Hospital in Lee's Summit said, hey, if you want to get married before the baby comes, we can make that happen. They decorate the hospital room. They turn a bed sheet into a wedding dress. And they even got a wedding cake from the cafeteria. That's what I'm talking about. Woo! Although check out on that baby bill. They may be billing you that one for the wedding cake. You know, these hospitals, they hit you at every corner. I'll leave it at that. But, you know, in an era when, like, we're about to have our third child this weekend. In an era when now when you walk into one of these rooms, like, you know, you're going to have the baby, and then Kate will spend a day or two in one of the rooms in the birthing center, as they call it. I'll never forget walking into that place when Claire was born. And they have a big whiteboard, right? And they have the baby's name, weight, all that kind of basic information. And I don't know if you remember this, Mark, since you just had your third. But in the corner of this whiteboard, it says partner's name. Or, no, not even partner. Support person with a colon. And then it'll say, like, Pete. Is that what your hospital said as well?
That's what the one most recently is. I don't remember 8 years ago, 11 years ago, but yeah, the most recent.
Support person.
Mm-hmm.
How sad is that? That you can't even put now father, husband. It's just support person. Why would that be? Well, because let's be honest. There are far too many children who are being born out of wedlock. Not even like, you know, here's the dad, right? Even if they're not married. Now it's just like, is there a support person? Is it the mother of the, is it the grandmother of the baby? Is it the father of the woman who just had the child? Like, just who is here to support you? Because we can't assume anymore that there's going to be a father in the picture, and that's terrible.
I'm not trying to suggest I was cutting corners back in the day when my kids were born, but I think the whiteboard just said perp. Yeah, I think that was apropos.
You've got 40% now of babies in this country born out of wedlock, up from 10% in 1970. Now, credit to Sarah and Brandon Perry for not being part of that statistic. They got it done in time. They said, screw it, we're getting married right here in the hospital a day before the baby comes after she goes into labor at 35 weeks. And they don't want to be part of that 40%. And good for them. Because study after study after study shows that the greatest privilege any of us can have, it's not our skin color. I mean, these dopes talking about white privilege this, white privilege that. It's a bunch of nonsense. The greatest privilege you can have is married parents. You look at data points across the country, you are far more likely to stay out of prison. You're far more likely to go to college, succeed, stay out of poverty when you are raised by married parents, regardless of what your skin color is and what your parents' backgrounds are and how much money they make. You have a much better chance of having success in life. Yet for some reason, when we look at, gosh, why is there a wealth gap? Why is there a gap in this, a gap in that? We never connect the dots. You know why? Because if we connected the dots on the facts, if we took the facts and we said, gosh, it doesn't matter what your skin color is, but what we know is that if you are raised by married parents, you're more likely to succeed. Suddenly, the government would be caught with its pants down. People would realize that so much of the government, which actually rewards you through its programs for not being married, is screwing people left and right and is not looking out for strong families in this country. In fact, they reward you if you do not have that strong family structure. So that's never going to be talked about. They're never going to have this conversation in Washington, D.C. They're just going to point to things that divide us, like race, when that's not really at all a part of what this conversation's about. And you can point back to a lot of the cultural rot that we have suffered in this country over the last generation, and it all ties back to that very same issue, not having strong families. And credit to Brandon and Sarah Perry and Lee Summit at St. Luke's East Hospital for getting married a day before that baby came 5 weeks early. Let's go, Brandon. On the text line, Pete, for once, I've got to give Mayor Lucas's theory of COVID breeding new nationwide younger criminals some serious credibility. Many of those criminals potentially are kids who fell through the COVID cracks. That's exactly right. And that's why I wanted to get the mayor on the record on that. Because I think we're all starting to see the light of day here, which is that when you look back on COVID and what we did and the policies that we took, when it came to kids in particular, it was beyond dumb to take kids out of school because they were a very low-risk group. Now, if you take the Blue Valley School District, you could have parents who could work from home. Maybe a parent wasn't working already in the traditional sense and was able to stay home with the kid, right? They could monitor the kid, make sure the kid was doing their work. In lower socioeconomic environments, that wasn't possible. Mom had 2 jobs. Mom was raising a couple of kids. Mom wasn't able to watch the kids every day, make sure they were going to school. Kids were out in the street corners getting caught up in trouble. And now we sit here and wonder why there's a wave across the nation of 15 and 16-year-old criminals. These kids were 12 years old during COVID. This is not a shocker and not a coincidence.
You are correct. As we would point out, organized neighborhood violence is not a new problem. However, the COVID situation allowed an echo chamber to amplify that, because an idle mind is the devil's workshop, right? Nobody's watching the kids. They don't have to go to school.
Yeah.
So now you got more time to invest
and
in
you got
these nefarious doings.
More time, I would say, as well, for the bad guys on the streets to groom these kids. At least school is a safe space for them. You know, at least it keeps them in some kind of a place to be safe and away from these thugs and gang members. And yes, I did use the word thugs, away from them. But COVID, starting spring of 2020 was a free-for-all. And it was all done in the name of, we're protecting everybody we can from COVID. Okay, and now we sit here with 15 and 16-year-old gangbangers and criminals and wonder where we went wrong. It's like Dr. Phil said. Dr. Phil, Shawnee Mission North's finest, said this on The View earlier in the week. And you know what? Dr. Phil, to his credit, was spot on calling out The View. And for people that are sitting there and saying, I don't know, we were trying to protect kids from COVID, you're out of touch if you're still of that opinion and think it was good policy. It wasn't at the time, and it's not now. And Dr. Phil called out The View for it this week.
And the same agencies that knew that are the agencies that shut down the schools for 2 years. Who does that? Who takes away the support system for these children? Who takes them away and shuts it down? And by the way, when they shut it down, they stopped the mandated reporters from being able to see children that were being abused and sexually molested, and in fact sent them home and abandoned them to their abusers with no way to watch, and referrals dropped 50 to 60%. So
there was also a pandemic going on. They were trying to save kids' lives.
Remember, we know a lot of folks who died during this. So it wasn't, people weren't.
Listen to the woke old boomer ladies who are completely out of touch try to own Dr. Phil, and he just throws it right back in their face.
Laying around eating bond, but, you know what? We're lucky. Maybe we're lucky they didn't, because we kept them out of the places that they could be sick, because no one wanted to believe we had an issue.
Are you saying no school children died of COVID?
I'm saying it was the safest group. They were the less vulnerable group, and they suffered and will suffer more from the mismanagement of COVID than they will from the exposure to COVID. And that's not an opinion, that's a fact.
That's a fact. And by the way, The View audience giving Dr. Phil a round of applause, people are waking up. It was garbage policy then. It is garbage policy now. 12-year-olds in environments that are unsafe with unstable home lives were better off sitting at home, supposedly being protected from COVID. instead of now some of these kids turning to lives of violent criminal actions and gangs? You tell me what they would have been better off doing. I mean, it's becoming clearer every day, and I appreciate the mayor recognizing that and, being honest about it. So we never make that mistake again and try to figure out the best way forward. All right, Kansas City's favorite couple, at least for some of us, maybe not some of you. Taylor Swift has laid down the law in the relationship with Travis Kelce. Did you see this from the Daily Mail?
Yeah, I saw that last week.
Okay. Well, here are some of the stories. I just saw this. Want to make sure I get to the good stuff here. Travis Kelce is not allowed to, number one, go to strip clubs.
Yep.
Okay. Check. That's a no-brainer. Easy enough. He can't go to strip clubs. And apparently he's fine with that. Another source told Life and Style that she is banning him from posing with female fans, and that has left him a little bit exasperated.
I think it was specifically a selfie, so one-on-one pics.
Okay.
Potentially. I don't know if it excluded group pictures, but yep, there's a photo rule.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, that may be a little much. Now, if it's selfies with individual women, maybe I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But if, you bump into a group of girls and young women and they want to take a photo, I don't really see the problem with that. I don't mind the strip club thing. I mean, that's like any relationship. Hey, don't go to strip clubs if we're going to be together. How are you going to argue that, by the way? I'd love to know the pitch of the guy who gets told he can't go to a strip club. Like, what's the argument to say, no, I should go to strip clubs?
She looks like you, honey. Reminded me of you, baby. Steve and KC, right?
Yeah, where are you? Where are some of our favorite callers to try to make the pitch on why Travis should be able to go to strip clubs?
Now, in light of these rules, did you notice this spin doctor's getting busy because he came back from Australia to go to what was a friend's wedding party, I believe.
In Vegas, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the glug were, Kelce glug champagne with scantily clad women. Trying to infer the whole strip bar rule was broken. And, well, these scantily clad women are simply wearing whatever women wear to a party of that nature, to have an off-the-shoulder dress is nuts. And furthermore, I think there's just pictures of him hanging right next to Patrick through most of this. But the spin doctors got busy trying to play with those rules.
Jeez, John, you are up to speed on this, brother.
I got to be informed, man. Keep up with these kids nowadays.
I guess that's your job as the news director here, but you are way more up to speed on this than I realized.
My fashion choices may give me away, but talk to me on the phone and you won't know.
No, you won't. That is so true. So he can't go to strip clubs. Apparently, the photos with women, there might be a gray area there. And also, she's going to help him with his fashion. Basically saying Travis has to pick up his fashion game a little bit, which I agree with. I mean, some of the stuff he's wearing is just bizarre. But I'm not against any of it. I think this is welcome to relationship life, especially when you're dating a billionaire. That's how it works there, big guy. Did Clark Hunt yesterday basically put an enormous hole in one of the Royals' big explanations for why they need to leave Kauffman Stadium? I wondered that as I was watching the Royals the Chiefs roll out their renderings yesterday for an upgraded Arrowhead Stadium, if the 3/8 sales tax was going to pass on April 2nd. And it's a lot of what I think expected. There's no roof. It's minor cosmetic improvements. The upper deck, you can now walk full 360. There'll be some coverage there for the upper deck. There'll be more suites. There'll be some kind of sweet stuff in the end zones. There'll be more points of sale, basically easier access to buying food and beer. There'll be more improvements on the tunnels, walking to and from the parking lots. There'll be a fan activation center where Kauffman Stadium used to be. So there's some cool stuff, but it's nothing crazy. But what we've been hearing from the Royals for the last several months now is that one of the reasons they want to leave Kauffman Stadium is because of the concrete. Now, I've said for a long time, when it comes to the Royals and their want to leave Kauffman Stadium, you have every right to want to leave. but sell us on the pros of going downtown and the benefits to Kansas City and the region for being downtown, instead of trying to sell us on this idea of concrete cancer, which is actually a phrase that they've used. Earl Santee is an engineer with Populous, big firm in town. They've actually done a lot of the venues all across the country. They did SoFi Stadium in L.A. They've done a lot of big projects, and they're right here in Kansas City. Earl Santee with Populous said this just a couple of weeks ago about the concrete at Kauffman Stadium.
So let me begin by talking a little bit about the K. So for us, and my backgrounds, I've been working at the K since the early 1990s. We've renovated, we've maintained it, we've sustained it. But renovating the K going forward is just not feasible. It's not realistic. And since 2007, we had an independent structural engineer come in, take a look at the K, and they identify the initial phase that we call ASR. This has been out in the public, it's been in the media. It just happens to be what it is. It causes the concrete to fail at some point. Now, all that means is that in 40 years it may fail, but it's going to fail at some point. So the ability to maintain the current structure is not really feasible.
Okay, yeah, and I guess, my house may collapse at some point. Don't know when. I mean, at some point my house is going to just fall over, I guess. I don't know if it's next week, next year, or in 100 years, but I guess at some point the house could fall over. So that was Earl Santee with Populous. Now, this comes 24 hours after KMBC Channel 9 had this report about a 2022 study done by Burns & McDonnell on behalf of the Jackson County Sports Complex. And according to the assessment, the stadium's flatwork, landscaping, and structures were mostly acceptable with routine maintenance. The study did find minor physical deficiencies. And then yesterday, Clark Hunt, the owner of the Chiefs, of course, he's talking about the structural quality of Arrowhead, and he says this.
The first thing we had to consider was the structural integrity of a more than 50-year-old stadium. We always knew that we'd like to stay here, but we had to figure out whether it was structurally possible. Thanks to the visionary design of this stadium in the late 60s and early 70s, and thanks in large part to the continued investment of Jackson County, the state of Missouri, the city of Kansas City, and our family, the stadium has weathered the test of time. We feel confident that with the right enhancements, GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium will continue to be the landmark that it is today.
My message to the Royals is very simple. Stop talking about the concrete.
Hear, hear.
Nobody wants to hear it. I'm not against them wanting to go downtown. I've said that for months now since this conversation started. I understand why they want to go downtown. I think there's a lot of benefits to them wanting to go downtown. But do not sit there and send up the guy from Populous, the guy from the company who's set to make a fortune off this deal, and tell everybody how the concrete's going to fail. And, it's just a matter of time. Could be 40 years. You're sitting up there in section 322, and the whole thing's going to collapse right below your feet. It could be you one day. Just stop with that garbage. I'm so sick of that. I don't want to hear about the concrete anymore. Sell me on the benefits of downtown. Don't fearmonger about the concrete, especially when 24 hours ago, KMBC had this report about Burns & McDonnell saying the concrete's fine. And Clark Hunt gets up there and says, yeah, thanks to, us investing in the stadium, structurally, we're A-okay. And you guys are like, man, I don't know. The thing could fall apart here in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And you highlight an issue that I've been thinking about recently. We had conversations yesterday on the air. It's like this. When you have a viewpoint that I'm opposed to, I am willing to listen up to the point that you insult my intelligence.
Yeah.
And it's usually with this injection of drama that does it's not necessary. I'm willing to listen that you don't want the stadium, but don't tell me it's going to fall down next week.
Yeah, and don't send the engineering guru up there to talk to me like I'm stupid, as if to say this thing's going to collapse if we're not careful. Just don't. I don't want to hear it anymore.
Well, it falls into this faulty stuff. Well, the Royals have 81 games and the Chiefs only play 10. Well, look, the Royals maybe average 20,000 a game, and I'm being generous, and the Chiefs average 80,000, and I'm giving them a few more seats as well. But
yeah.
1 Chiefs game equals 4 Royals game. 10 Chiefs games equals 40 Royals game. We've got all the concerts. Kenny Chesney comes to get his mail every year and does a show at Arrowhead, right?
Yeah.
Luke Combs, Taylor Swift, Rolling Stones, yada, yada. Royals used to have more concerts, and they've had a few recently. But, overall, it's probably a lot more equal than we might insinuate with the home schedule comparisons.
Probably. You kind of crunched the numbers there briefly, and it's probably closer than we're giving them credit for. But if you're the Royals and you're looking at these next few weeks, and you've got 4.5 weeks to convince the voters in Jackson County to vote yes on April 2nd, go to every community event you can go to if you're John Sherman. This is what I would do. And this is what I told, close friends of his here in the last few days. Go to every community event you can go to. Take some of the slings and arrows. Do as much media as you can. And just come off like a Kansas Cityan trying to benefit the community. Don't hide behind pretty TV commercials. One of the reasons John Sherman was, and I think for the most part is, beloved, and everyone appreciated him back in 2019 when he bought the team, is because he was a Kansas City guy who was committed to this town and this team in this town. And I still think he is in large part. But it's because, he wasn't one of these flashy guys coming in from out of town, buying the team and promising the world. He was just a Kansas City guy who led a local group to buy the Royals. And people like that, and people appreciate that. And I've had him on the show a couple of times. I've met him a couple of times out at Kauffman Stadium on opening day, and he's come on the show. And he's very easy to talk to, and he's easy to like. So if you have that quality, he doesn't come off like one of these, ritzy billionaire elitist owners. That's not how he comes across. If you were to talk to the guy one-on-one, you wouldn't know that about him. So if that's a quality that you possess, and John Sherman does possess that, I mean that as a compliment, then use that to your advantage. If you're somebody that people inherently want to like and do like, and you're a reasonable person, and I believe in my interactions, John Sherman checks off all those boxes, then use it to your advantage. You don't come off like Mark Cuban or George Steinbrenner or some of these goobers. So go out there, be a man of the people, and you can pass this thing with flying colors.
Yeah, I think we'll buy. Guys, hey, I'm one of you. It's going to be harder for me to keep this team in town than it might be to keep the Yankees in New York. I think we'll all understand that and buy that and come from that angle.
Yeah.
Right?
And we
understand.
And he can do that, and he can make that pitch, and it should start yesterday. My fear is that, the political consultants are trying to prove their worth, as they oftentimes do, and say, just leave it to us. Give us $1 million for the campaign. We'll get it covered. We'll get you the fancy TV commercials and the whole thing. It's like, this is not as it rarely is as complicated as the political consultants turn it into. Rarely. I mean, these guys, John Sherman has had tremendous success in his life as a businessman. His gut instincts have probably been right more times than they've been wrong. You don't become a billionaire otherwise. And now you're going to let some, political consultants basically take it away from you and tell you what to do? Trust your gut. It's going to be all right. Kevin Kietzman at 9:05. We'll talk to him. Don't miss that on KCMO Talk Radio. If you're already at the office by then, make sure you stream it on the KCMO Talk Radio app. We finally have a couple of perps charged from the Crown Center shooting from weeks ago. That took long enough. But I'm still wondering where the noise was from a certain group that has been very quiet on this. I'll tell you who that is and why I think they've been quiet next on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM, and stream it on the KCMO Talk Radio app. All right, they got a couple of thugs arrested and charged in the shooting that injured half a dozen people last month at Crown Center. Finally, long overdue, and the two men are affiliated with the 9th Street Mob. It is a gang that operates in an East Side neighborhood in KCMO. Jackson County Prosecutor's Office announced yesterday that Jose Olivas, and by the way, I was getting reports from some folks this morning that the name is not actually Jose. Here's what someone told me that I trust. Prosecutors made a mistake with the suspect's name. It's Joel, not Jose. Now, everyone's reporting Jose, but the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office apparently screwed up the guy's name. I mean, they can't do anything right over there. My goodness. So anyway, let's just call him Olivas, 24-year-old dude, and Brian Favela, 22 years old, have been charged with 26 felony counts in connection with the shooting at Crown Center last month. Now, amazingly, I have not heard nearly as much from the business community down there as certainly the noise that I would have been making. You know, like if I owned a shop down there in Crown Center, I don't know what I'd sell, but if I was selling tchotchkes down in Crown Center, all right, and Mark had a sports book down there. Well, he couldn't have a sports book on the Missouri side, but, you know.
Sports hat shop.
Sports hat, that's good. Mark would have a sports hat shop, and John would open up a McDonald's that only sold filet of fish. If we had our businesses down there at Crown Center, I know this much, I'd be screaming to anybody who would listen about how the crime in this town is out of control, it's completely unacceptable, and now it's impacting tourist spots of Kansas City, and it's got to end. And I'd be calling out our feckless prosecutor's office, our city leadership that is not calling out the prosecutor's office. I'd be doing everything I can to get as much earned media as I could. From TV, from radio, from social media, from anybody who would listen. Instead, have you heard a peep from anybody down there? It's been nothing but crickets. You know it and I know it. Now, the last time we heard from people complaining at Crown Center was the lady who ran the dress shop when she was upset that no one bought her sundresses the weekend of the NFL draft. Yeah, because, you know, meatheads who are coming in to drink beer and cheer on their football team are also looking for sundresses in Crown Center.
She was misdirected in anticipating a big crowd and had extra staff prepared and everything like that. See?
Yeah. That's the last time we heard from business owners at Crown Center.
Yeah.
They didn't say a word about any of this. Now, there's two schools of thought. One, and I've heard this theory, that basically Crown Center businesses wanted to kind of like, shh, hush, hush, hush. Quiet now, don't say anything. We don't want this to get too much attention because then people are going to be scared to come to Crown Center. So they wanted to sweep it right under the rug. Make sure that you didn't know about it. And by the way, talking with my buddy Nick Haynes from Kansas City PBS a couple of weeks ago, and he was telling me how he was at an event a few weeks prior to that, and he was like, yeah, no one knew about a shooting at Crown Center between alleged, gang groups. He's like, yeah, it was news to a lot of them. I'm like, not the KCMO listeners. They were up to speed. They knew what was going on in this town. Just because other people want to bury their heads in the sand and listen to Led Zeppelin on repeat on other radio stations doesn't mean that, a large part of this audience does. You don't. That's why you're here. That's why you're listening. But for too many of them, Crown Center businesses, they were just hoping that this would not get a lot of attention. But here's the thing. They're also whistling past the graveyard. If you are invested in Crown Center and you think that this was just a one-off, this will never happen again, you're naive to what's going on in this town. And the Super Bowl parade shooting backed that up. You are seeing more violence in parts of town where it never happened, or at least was far less likely to happen. And yes, it's still less likely to happen at Power and Light and Union Station and Crown Center and the Plaza and things like that, but they're not immune anymore. Because as we've talked about for years now, as the crime gets worse, it's going to spread. As criminals continue to fear or not have fear of law enforcement and not have fear of prosecution, they're not going to limit their crime to just their neighborhoods. They will end up in a shootout in Crown Center. They will end up in a beef turning into a shootout outside of the Super Bowl parade with 1 million people around them. They don't care. They do not fear anybody in this town. And if you're a business owner down at Crown Center, I guess the other way you could handle it is just once your lease ends, run for the hills and get the hell out of there. But, if you got a multi-year lease and you're kind of locked in, don't you want it to be as welcoming and safe as a spot as you possibly can? And not end up in this situation where you've got to kind of, hush, hush, don't talk about the shooting. We don't want anyone to know. None of these business owners spoke out after that Crown Center shooting. A lot of people who were there talked to the news, but no one really spoke out about it. Now, this morning we had Quinton Lucas on. He comes on every morning, or every Thursday morning. Every morning would be too much, even for him. He'd be sick of us if it was every morning. Every Thursday morning, the mayor comes on this show at 7:30. I asked him about this Crown Center shooting, the arrests and the charges that were filed yesterday. Here's what the mayor had to say.
I think what I would say is this. We know that lawlessness cannot be tolerated. We've had a few pretty notorious incidents of late, and I think everybody in the criminal justice system and process on the whole recognizes that the city needs to be a safer city long term. And so I will agree with you in this sense. I don't think it's accidental that in the same winter, and even though it wasn't really covered that much, that you see a proposal that increases police salaries by 30%. You see, I think, fairly tough prosecutions against a number of people involved in these cases and ongoing and exceptional work done by our police department and our investigators in all of these mass shooting scenarios where you are getting charges and serious ones. And so I expect that to continue. I expect that to continue with the next prosecutor starting early next year. I commend our current Jackson County prosecutor and her assistant prosecutors for, I think, bringing very serious and numerous charges against the men involved in the Crown Center shooting, and I expect more of that to happen as we go into the warm weather months.
That was Mayor Lucas last hour here on KCMO. The entire interview is up on the podcast page. Wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the show. That way you never miss any of our interviews. So, he's doing the tough on crime talk there, which I appreciate. And I did bring this up to him, and this was what led to that answer. Are we starting to see an awakening from this Jackson County prosecutor's office in the wake of what happened 2 weeks ago, yesterday, at the Super Bowl parade? I can't help but think that's exactly what's going on here. Am I confident that these two guys would be charged with 26 felonies, held on $500,000 cash-only bond today, had it not been for the Super Bowl parade shooting a couple of weeks ago? I can't say that with any confidence. You know why? Because both these guys who are arrested, they have been known to law enforcement as being involved in this for several weeks. In fact, how about this? All right, you want to go back and look at this story. Olivas was arrested the day after the Crown Center shooting at the airport attempting to board a flight to Seattle, while the other guy, Favela, was taken into custody later that day after officers followed a vehicle from the airport to a KCMO residence. At least one of these guys were trying to flee. And despite the fact that they were both arrested the next day, they were released after the investigative hold ended. So they weren't charged during that initial period. Now, they were subsequently charged, but the case was sealed until these two guys were eventually arrested yesterday and hit with these 26 felonies. And that was 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks ago. One of the guys was at the airport trying to go halfway across the country, and who knows where after that. Dude might have been on his way to, I don't know, Canada. So I still don't have any faith in this prosecutor's office, but if there's been an awakening because of the public, local, and national pressure on the office, I guess better late than never. That's the best I'll say.